The Holy Mass, an explanation by Dom Prosper Guéranger OSB. Incensing of the Altar. We have already seen how the altar represents our Lord. This explains why it is treated with so much honor. The rest of the Church represents the members of the mystical body of which Christ is the head, that is to say, the faithful of whose aggregate Holy Church, the bride of Christ, is composed. On first going up to the altar, the priest has already incensed it in every direction, thus paying homage to Christ himself. Now again, this ceremony is performed with sacred pageantry. Just as the Eastern kings laid their rich gifts at the feet of the divine infant, as the Gospel tells us, so too is the priest about to burn incense in his turn as a homage to his master and his king. But another ceremony must precede that of the incensing of the altar itself. This bread and wine, just offered by the priest, have been raised above the order of common things by this very offering made of them, so much so indeed that were the priest to die at this moment of the function, this bread and wine must be disposed of in the piscina. To show her reverence for them, Holy Church sheds on them the perfume of her incense, as if she were doing so to Christ himself. This custom of using perfumes in church ceremonies began in the East, where they can be procured in rich abundance. But in our cold countries, though it is much more difficult to get them, Holy Church will not allow our ceremonies to be utterly deprived of them, and so she prescribes the use at least of incense, just as for the chrism, she will at least have balsam mixed with the oil. After the incensing of the bread and wine, incensatio super oblata, the altar itself is honored in like manner. Before making use of the incense, it must be blessed. The priest does so by the following prayer. Per intercessionem beati Michaelis, archangelis stantis et exis altaris incensi. The angel who holds the golden thurible in the Apocalypse is not named. Holy Church here names St. Michael, Prince of the Heavenly Hosts. Some have thought that there is an error in this passage, because in St. Luke, the angel Gabriel is named standing at the right of the altar, but Holy Church pays no heed to these their objections. St. Luke does not say that Gabriel held a golden thurible. The first blessing of the incense was less solemn. The priest then only said, Ab illo benedicaris in cuius honore cremaberis. Mayest thou be blessed by him in honor of whom thou art to be burned. But in this place the angels are called upon because the mystery of incense is no other than the prayer of the saints presented to God by the angels, as St. John tells us in his Apocalypse, chapter 8, verse 4. The smoke of the incense ascends, as does the prayer of the saints before the throne of God. Et ascendit fumus incensorum de orationibus sanctorum de manu angeli coram Deo. The priest incenses the bread and wine in such a way that its odor may perfume and wholly cloud in fragrance the things offered. While so doing, he says these words, Incensum istud a te benedictum, ascendat a te Domine, et descendat super nos misericordia tua. May this incense, blessed by thee, ascend to thee, O Lord, and may thy mercy descend upon us. This prayer, whilst being a homage paid to God, is a wish expressed for ourselves also. The priest divides these words at intervals, whilst incensing the several parts to be thus honored, in performing which ceremony he follows what the rubrics prescribe. When he first incensed the altar, the priest said no prayer. But now, when thus honoring it a second time, Holy Church bids him repeat a portion of Psalm CXL, which she selects, chiefly on account of these words which occur therein, and which are the first she puts on the lips of the priest. Dirigatur Domine oratio me sicut incensum in conspectu tuo. May my prayer, O Lord, ascend as incense in thy sight. It is thus she always does, ever selecting with wonderful appropriateness whatsoever suits the circumstance, whether in psalms or in gospels and epistles. The priest begins by incensing the cross, or the most holy sacrament if exposed. He then bows before the cross, or genuflects if the most holy sacrament is reserved in the tabernacle of that altar. Then, if there be relics there exposed, he incenses them with 2 throws of the thurible, first on the gospel side, then on the epistle side, after which he incenses every part of the altar. In all other respects, this incensing differs in no way from the first, nor from that which is performed at Lauds and Vespers. On returning the thurible to the deacon, the priest gives expression to a good wish in his regard, as well as his own, saying, Accendat in nobis Dominus iniam sui amoris et flammam aeterne caritatis. May the Lord enkindle in us the fire of his love and the flame of everlasting charity. On taking the thurible, the deacon kisses the priest's hand, and then the top of the chains. He does the contrary on presenting it. These customs have come to us from the East, and inasmuch as they are marks of reverence and respect, it is to the liturgy we owe the preservation of them. The deacon then honors the priest with incense, who receives it standing sideways to the altar, but if the most holy sacrament be exposed, as for instance at the Mass of Reposition, the priest comes down from the altar, and with his face turned to the people, he receives the said honors from the deacon, who likewise suits his position to the occasion. Then follows the incensing of the choir, beginning with the bishop if present, next the prelates if there, then the priests and clerics, and finally all the faithful, to show that all form but one body, of which Jesus Christ is the head. All, whether bishops, prelates, or simple faithful, should rise on receiving the incense. The Pope alone remains seated for its reception. Lavabo, Psalm 25. Whilst the choir and people are being honoured with incense, the priest washes his hands. This ceremony is marked at this particular moment because the priest has just been using the thurible, which always soils the hands because of the smoke. But at the same time, this washing of the hands embodies a mystery. It expresses the necessity there is for the priest to purify himself yet more and more as he advances in the holy sacrifice. Just as our Lord washed the feet of his apostles before instituting the Holy Eucharist and giving them Holy Communion, so too should the priest purify himself. In the Ambrosian liturgy, this rite of washing the hands takes place during the canon, before the consecration. The signification is ever the same, namely, the duty of self-purification incumbent on the priest. Nevertheless, the moment chosen for this rite by the Roman Church, ever discreet in all her decisions, is preferable to that adopted by the Ambrosian liturgy. To accompany this action, which signifies what the purity of the priest should be, Holy Church has selected the Psalm 25, which is marked in the monastic office in the first nocturne of Sunday's Matins. Judica me, Domine, quoniam ego in innocentia me ingressu sum. In this psalm, it is our Lord himself who speaks. It is easy to perceive that the priest could never apply such words to himself. Holy Church appoints but the half of this psalm to be said, commencing with the words, Lavabo inter innocentes manus meus et circumdamo altare tuum Domine. I will wash my hands, O Lord, and make myself like to those who are in the state of innocence, so as to be worthy to approach thine altar, to hear thy sacred canticles, and to recount thy marvellous works. Every word is wonderfully adapted to the present occasion. Further on, we come across this other remarkable expression of the prophet. Domine, dilexi decorum domus tui et locum habitationis gloriae tuae. Lord, I have loved the beauty of thy house, the place where thy glory dwelleth. David here speaks of that tabernacle under the shade of which he dwelt so happy, although the temple was not yet in existence, for it was not built till Solomon's time. The psalm is continued to the end, so as to allow the priest ample time for washing and wiping his hands. This other verse of the same psalm, Ego autem in innocentia me ingressu sum, I have walked in mine innocence, proves to us once again that this psalm is altogether messianic. The priest therefore says it in the name of Christ, with whom he is but one and the same during the action of the great sacrifice. In Masses of the Dead and at Passiontide, when the Mass is ferial, the Gloria is omitted at the end of this psalm. This omission of the Gloria in this place is always coupled with the omission of Psalm Judica at the beginning of the Mass.